Hello, I'm a 62-year-old woman who witnessed the devastating end of people who tried to steal my life in the name of family. I worked for 40 years until my fingers twisted, saved up $5 million, and signed a contract for my dream restaurant, but, honey, for tax reasons, we need to put it under Vanessa's name. You're just a cook, not a CEO. You're just a cook, not a CEO. At that moment, I was truly speechless and couldn't believe what I was hearing. But when I pulled something out, my husband of 10 years dropped to his knees on the floor and started sobbing. It was a federal arrest warrant. Chefs know how to handle fire. We know exactly when and how hot to use it. How can there be so many shameless people in this world? Listen to my story. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. The late afternoon sun slanted through the French Quarter penthouse windows. Golden light painted the granite counters. Mia King stood at her cutting board, knife in hand. Her weathered fingers gripped the handle with quiet authority. At 62, arthritis lived in her knuckles like old ghosts. Each morning brought fresh reminders. But her hands still moved with purpose. They had built an empire, one perfect dish at a time. The okra fell into neat half-inch rounds. Green circles scattered across the cutting board. Each slice carried the weight of 40 years in kitchens. From the cramped apartment stove to this marble palace overlooking Royal Street. Her Medicare card sat beside the vegetables. Blue and white plastic, edges softened by countless trips to doctors. Next it, a brown bottle of pain relievers. The morning dose was fading. Mia paused, studying the label. She twisted the cap open. Pills rattled like small bones. 2 tablets dropped into her palm. The water glass felt cool against her lips. The building contract lay spread across the kitchen island. $5 million. Historic brick and wrought iron balconies. Her flagship restaurant, King's Legacy, would rise from those bones. The dream she had carried since David first kissed her hand in that tiny rental space. But dreams had a way of souring in humid air. David's footsteps echoed from the hallway. Quick, nervous taps on hardwood. He appeared in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled. When he saw her watching, the phone disappeared into his pocket. Who was that? Mia asked. She kept her voice light. The okra waited under her blade. Nobody important. David moved to the coffee maker. His hands shook slightly as he poured. Just work stuff. Work. David hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. His consulting business existed mainly in his imagination and their joint checking account. Mia had stopped asking questions. Some truths hurt more than arthritis. The Social Security envelope sat unopened on the counter. Yesterday's mail, forgotten in the restaurant rush. David's eyes fixed on it now like a hawk spotting prey. Did you check your projected benefits? His voice carried false casualness. We might need to adjust our joint filing status. Mia's knife stopped mid-chop. In 10 years of marriage, David had never shown interest in tax forms. He left financial details to her accountant and his golf buddy's advice. She looked up from the cutting board. Why? Just thinking ahead. David's coffee mug trembled in his hands. Retirement planning, you know? Smart couples talk about these things. The words felt rehearsed, like dialogue from a play he had practiced elsewhere. Mia studied his face. New lines creased the corners of his eyes. When had those appeared? Outside, church bells chimed 5 o'clock. The sound drifted through old glass windows, mixing with distant jazz from Frenchman Street. This was her favorite hour. When shadows grew long and the city exhaled its held breath. But today, even the bells sounded wrong. David set down his mug. Coffee sloshed onto the marble. He didn't notice. His attention had shifted to something beyond the windows. A black sedan idled at the corner. Its windows were tinted dark. Expecting someone? Mia asked. No. The word came too quickly. Maybe a lost tourist. The doorbell rang. Once, twice, then a steady insistent chiming that echoed through the penthouse. David's whole body went rigid. His coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the floor. Brown liquid spread across white tiles. I'll get it. He was already moving toward the front door. His voice carried over his shoulder. Probably just a delivery. But his steps were too fast. Too eager. like he was running towards something instead of answering a bell. Mia followed slowly, okra forgotten. Her bare feet avoided the coffee puddle. The hallway stretched before her, lined with photographs of restaurant openings. Her life's work smiled back from silver frames. David's voice carried from the foyer. High-pitched, nervous laughter. Then another voice. Female. Familiar in the worst possible way. Surprise, little brother. Vanessa. Mia's stomach dropped like a stone through water. She reached the foyer just as David stepped back from the open door. His sister stood framed in the doorway like a theatrical entrance. Vanessa King Martinez Williams Thompson had collected last names like jewelry. And discarded them just as easily. 6 Louis Vuitton trunks crowded the hallway behind her. Each one bore travel stickers from places David and Mia had never afforded to visit. Vanessa's blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the humidity. Her silk dress probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Darling Mia. Vanessa's voice rang with false warmth. She air-kissed both of Mia's cheeks, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I'm between living situations. Between husbands, more likely. Vanessa's third divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. The settlement details had remained mysteriously vague. But the sudden appearance of luggage told its own story. Of course not. Mia's voice came out steady despite the tightness in her chest. How long are you staying? Oh, just temporarily. Vanessa's smile was bright as a knife blade. Until I get back on my feet. You know how it is after a breakup. Everything feels so scattered. Her eyes swept the penthouse entrance with calculating precision. Taking inventory. Assessing value. The antique chandelier, the Persian runner, the original oil paintings. Each glance felt like an appraisal. This place has such potential, Vanessa continued. Though it's a bit ethnic, don't you think? All these jazz posters and Creole colors. Very 1990s, but we can work with it. We. The word hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. David cleared his throat. Vanessa needs the master suite. She's had a difficult few months. You understand, honey. Family comes first. The guest room. Mia would be sleeping in the guest room of her own home. The room she had designed as an office. Where her business plans and restaurant sketches lived in careful stacks. Of course, she heard herself say. The words tasted like cold gumbo. Vanessa was already directing the luggage delivery up the stairs. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The movers grunted under the weight of her belongings. Designer shoes clicked against hardwood like a countdown timer. Mia retreated to the kitchen. The okra lay scattered where she had left it. Some pieces had begun to brown at the edges. She gathered them mechanically, her hands moving without conscious thought. The building contract still waited on the counter. $5 million. King's legacy. The restaurant that would crown her career. But the papers felt heavier now. Like they were printed on lead instead of paper. Steam rose from the forgotten gumbo pot. The roux had darkened to the perfect chocolate brown. 40 years of practice had taught her hands to stir without thinking. Even in crisis, muscle memory carried on. But for the first time in decades, the smell made her stomach turn. Rich and complex and suddenly suffocating. Like the humid air before a summer storm. When pressure built behind your eyes and the sky turned the color of old brass. She turned off the burner. The bubbling stopped. Silence filled the kitchen except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Louis Vuitton wheels rolling across upstairs floors. David appeared in the doorway. His face wore the expression of a man trying to sell a lie to himself. It's only temporary, he said. A few weeks at most. Mia nodded. She kept stirring the now cool gumbo. The spoon clinked against the pot's sides. A rhythm like a funeral bell. Besides, David continued, Vanessa has business experience. She might help with the restaurant expansion. You could use the advice. Business experience. Vanessa's business experience consisted of spending other people's money until they ran out or filed for divorce. Whichever came first. Maybe, Mia said. Her voice sounded far away, even to herself. David moved closer. His hand touched her shoulder. The gesture that once brought comfort now felt like a weight. You're the best, honey. I knew you'd understand. Through the window, the black sedan was gone. But somehow its absence felt more ominous than its presence. Like the quiet moment before lightning strikes. Mia looked at the Social Security envelope again. Still unopened. Still waiting. David's earlier questions echoed in her memory. Joint filing status. Projected benefits. Words that had never crossed his lips before today. She picked up the envelope. David's eyes tracked the movement like a cat watching a mouse. His breathing quickened almost imperceptibly. You know what? Mia set it down again. I'll look at this tomorrow. After we get Vanessa settled. Relief flickered across David's features. So brief it might have been imagined. But Mia had spent 40 years reading faces across kitchen passes. She knew the difference between hunger and desperation. Between satisfaction and relief. The church bells chimed 6 o'clock. Dinner hour in the quarter. Time when families gathered around tables to share the day's stories. When the honest work of feeding people began. But tonight, the kitchen felt like a stage. And Mia couldn't shake the feeling she was the only one who didn't know her lines. She opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients. Andouille sausage, green onions, file powder, the holy trinity of Creole cooking. Celery, onions, bell peppers. The foundation of everything she had built. Her hands moved automatically. Dice the vegetables. Brown the sausage. Build the base. Layer by layer, like constructing a cathedral. Each step deliberate and true. But as she worked, Vanessa's laughter drifted down from upstairs. High and bright and somehow predatory. It mixed with David's nervous responses. Two voices planning something just beyond hearing. The knife felt solid in Mia's hand. Reliable. Honest. It cut what you pointed it toward without hidden motives or false smiles. She wished people were as straightforward as sharp steel. The file powder dusted the counter like gray snow. Its earthy scent rose to mix with the sausage and vegetables. Comfort food, the kind that warmed you from the inside out on cold nights. But comfort was a luxury Mia could no longer afford. Not with 6 Louis Vuitton trunks sitting in her bedroom. Not with David's questions about Social Security echoing in her memory. She tasted the gumbo with a wooden spoon. Perfect balance of heat and flavor. The kind of dish that made people close their eyes and sigh with satisfaction. Her life's work, distilled into a single spoonful. The spoon clattered into the sink. For the first time in 40 years, perfect gumbo tasted like ashes in her mouth. 3 days passed like slow poison through Mia's veins. Vanessa had transformed the penthouse into her personal kingdom. Designer scarves draped over antique chairs. Expensive moisturizers claimed counter space in the master bathroom. The scent of French perfume lingered in hallways that once smelled of garlic and bay leaves. Mia folded her clothes into the guest room dresser. Each item felt like surrender. Her silk blouses pressed against David's old golf magazines. Her jewelry box sat beside his collection of unpaid bills. The room that once held her dreams now contained the debris of a life being slowly dismantled. The master suite's door stayed closed most mornings. Behind it, Vanessa slept until noon on Egyptian cotton sheets. Sheets that Mia had chosen, paid for, and now watched through the crack in her own guest room door. She needs her rest, David explained over breakfast. He buttered his toast with unusual care. The divorce was traumatic. You understand trauma, right, honey? Mia understood many things. Trauma was watching your life's work fund someone else's recovery. Trauma was sleeping in your own guest room while strangers renovated your reality. The mail arrived at 10:30 each morning. Bills and business correspondence mixed with Vanessa's forwarded packages. Designer clothing catalogs. Luxury spa brochures. Credit card offers addressed to addresses Mia had never heard of. But today's mail brought something different. The explanation of benefits envelope felt thin between Mia's fingers. Her health insurance company's logo smiled up from crisp white paper. She opened it while standing in the kitchen where morning light filtered through hurricane glass windows. The claim summary made her stomach clench. Cosmetic consultation. Date of service last Tuesday. Provider drive. Beaumont's Aesthetic Center. Amount $800. Mia had never heard of Dr. Beaumont. She certainly hadn't visited his clinic. Last Tuesday, she had spent 12 hours at the restaurant, training new servers and testing menu adjustments. Her hands smelled of shrimp and roux, not surgical antiseptic. She read the document twice. The patient ID matched her social security number. The billing address listed their penthouse. But the signature authorization bore careful cursive that looked nothing like her own handwriting. David emerged from the shower, hair damp and face flushed. Steam followed him down the hallway like guilty secrets. He whistled off key while buttoning his shirt. The same tune he hummed when nervous. David. Mia held up the paper. What's this? His whistling stopped mid-note. Water droplets fell from his hair onto the hardwood floor. Each drop sounded loud in the sudden silence. What's what? But his eyes had already found the insurance letterhead. Recognition flickered across his features like lightning behind clouds. A cosmetic consultation I never had. $800 charged to my insurance. David moved to the coffee maker. His movements were too casual. Too practiced. Like an actor hitting familiar marks on a stage. Must be a clerical error. You know how incompetent insurance companies are. I'll handle it. Handle it. David's solution to every inconvenience that required actual effort. Usually, handling it meant filing papers somewhere and forgetting they existed. Like his business taxes. Like their marriage counseling appointments. Like the growing stack of past due notices hidden in his desk drawer. I should call them myself, Mia said. No need. David's voice carried sharp edges now. I'll take care of it this afternoon. You focus on the restaurant. That building deal needs your attention. The building deal. $5 million. King's legacy. The crown jewel that would cap her career. But every mention of it lately came wrapped in David's insistence. Like he was more invested in her success than she was. Mia folded the insurance paper and slipped it into her purse. David's eyes tracked the movement. His coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. I'm going to check the business accounts, she said. Make sure everything's ready for the closing. Good idea. Relief colored his voice. Always smart to stay on top of things. But his relief felt premature. Like someone celebrating before the race ended. The laptop screen glowed blue in the guest room's morning shadow. Mia typed her login credentials with muscle memory. Numbers and passwords that had governed her empire for 2 decades. Digital keys to everything she had built. The business checking account loaded slowly. Numbers appeared line by line like evidence in a courtroom. Deposits from the restaurant. Vendor payments for food and linens. Payroll transfers for 37 employees who depended on her decisions. Then she saw it. Consulting fee, V. King. $10,000. Withdrawn yesterday at 3:47 p.m. Mia stared at the screen until her eyes watered. The transaction details offered no explanation. No invoice number. No description beyond those 4 words. Consulting fee, V. King. Vanessa King. David's sister. The woman sleeping in the master bedroom on sheets Mia had purchased. Vanessa. Mia's voice carried through the penthouse like breaking glass. Footsteps approached slowly. Designer heels clicked against hardwood with measured precision. Vanessa appeared in the doorway wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's weekly salary. Her hair was perfectly arranged despite the early hour. Good morning, darling. Vanessa's smile was bright as fresh paint. You look upset. Everything all right? Mia turned the laptop screen toward her. The transaction glowed between them like an accusation. $10,000. Consulting fee. Care to explain? Vanessa's expression didn't change. If anything, her smile grew warmer. More maternal. Like a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. Oh, that. She waved manicured fingers dismissively. I've been rebranding the restaurant's image. Professional consultation. Market analysis. Your brand is stuck in the 80s, darling. I'm doing you a favor. You withdrew $10,000 from my business account. David authorized it. Vanessa perched on the guest room's chair like a bird claiming territory. We discussed it last week. Didn't he mention it? No. David hadn't mentioned authorizing $10,000 for his sister's undefined consulting services. David, who couldn't balance a checkbook or remember to pay parking tickets on time. What exactly did you consult on? Brand positioning, market demographics, social media strategy. Vanessa's words flowed like rehearsed script. Your current image appeals to tourists and nostalgia seekers. But the real money comes from younger professionals. People with disposable income and Instagram followers. The real money. Mia had been chasing fake money for 40 years, apparently. Building an empire on tourist dollars and nostalgia seekers instead of Instagram influencers. I'd like to see your analysis. Of course. Vanessa stood, adjusting her robe with practiced elegance. I'll compile everything into a presentation. Very professional. You'll be impressed. She glided from the room, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive promises. Her footsteps faded up the staircase toward the master suite. Toward the bedroom where she slept on Mia's sheets and planned expenditures from Mia's accounts. The laptop screen still glowed with the transaction details. $10,000. Consulting fee, V. King. The numbers didn't change no matter how long Mia stared at them. David's voice carried from the kitchen. He was on the phone again, speaking in low tones. His words were indistinct but his tone was urgent. The way people spoke when discussing problems that required immediate solutions. Mia closed the laptop and walked toward the kitchen. David's back was turned to her. The phone pressed against his ear like a confessional booth. His free hand gestured animatedly at empty air. Extension on the deadline, he was saying. Just 2 more weeks. The building deal closes next Friday. Building deal. Extension. Deadline. Words that suggested David's problems extended beyond insurance fraud and unauthorized consulting fees. He turned and saw her standing in the doorway. His face went white as uncooked flour. "I have to go," he said into the phone. The call ended with suspicious speed. "Morning, honey. Ready for another beautiful day?" "Beautiful." David's smile looked painted on with shaking hands. "Who was that?" Mia asked. "Work stuff. Boring contractor nonsense. Nothing you need to worry about." Nothing she needed to worry about. Like the insurance consultation she never had. Like the $10,000 withdrawn from her business account. Like the growing stack of secrets that threatened to topple her life like a house of cards in hurricane winds. David. Mia sat across from him at the kitchen table. The surface was polished granite, smooth as a mirror. It reflected her face back in pieces. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About Vanessa's consulting fee. About my insurance being used for procedures I never had. About phone calls concerning deadlines and building deals." David's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. Brown liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the white porcelain. "Mia, stop obsessing over pennies. Focus on the big picture. You're stressing everyone out." Everyone. The mysterious everyone who apparently had opinions about Mia's financial oversight. Everyone who thought she was obsessing over pennies instead of focusing on building deals and consulting fees and extensions on mysterious deadlines. "I built this business on pennies," Mia said. "Pennies add up to dollars. Dollars add up to empires. And empires can be lost over paperwork," David snapped. His mask slipped for just a moment. Underneath lay something desperate and hungry. "The building deal is worth $5 million. Don't sabotage it over clerical errors and family favors." Sabotage. As if protecting her own money constituted an act of war against her husband's plans. Vanessa descended the staircase like a fashion model on a runway. She had changed into a white sundress that emphasized her recent weight loss. Divorce diet, she called it. The pounds that melted away with marital disappointment. "Morning, David." She kissed his cheek with theatrical affection. "Sleep well?" David slept in the guest room now too. On the narrow sofa that barely accommodated his frame. But somehow, his sister's comfort took precedence over his own rest. Like a baby, he lied. Vanessa settled into the chair beside him. Her movements were fluid, graceful. Like a dancer taking position for a performance. She poured orange juice from the crystal pitcher Mia had inherited from her grandmother. "Mia, darling," Vanessa said. "I've been thinking about your restaurant's wine selection. Very pedestrian. I know a sommelier who could elevate your offerings dramatically." Elevate. Everything in Mia's life apparently needed elevation. Her brand required rebranding. Her wine selection needed sophistication. Her insurance needed unauthorized consultations. How much would that cost? Mia asked. "Investment, darling. Not cost. Maybe $15,000 for initial consultation and inventory analysis." $15,000. Consulting fees were apparently inflation-proof in Vanessa's economy. David leaned forward eagerly. "That's brilliant, Vanessa. Mia, you've been talking about upgrading the wine program for years." Had she? Mia couldn't remember expressing dissatisfaction with her current wine selection. Customers seemed pleased with the carefully curated list of Louisiana vintages and French imports. But apparently, her memory was as unreliable as her business instincts. "I'll think about it," Mia said. "Don't think too long," Vanessa warned gently. Good consultants book quickly, especially ones willing to work with Established businesses. Established. A polite way of saying old-fashioned, outdated, irrelevant to Instagram-savvy professionals with disposable income. The church bells chimed 11 o'clock. Time to leave for the restaurant. Time to escape the careful choreography of consultation fees and elevation strategies. Time to return to the honest work of feeding people who appreciated her established business practices. But as Mia gathered her purse and keys, David's laptop sat open on the counter. The screen faced away from the table, but email notifications popped up in the corner. She glimpsed fragments of subject lines before they disappeared. Final notice. Past due. Collection agency. And then, just before the screen went dark, gambling debt recovery services minus $50,000 due immediately. $50,000. Gambling debt. Due immediately. Mia's keys slipped from her fingers. They clattered against the granite floor like falling coins. The sound echoed through the kitchen where David and Vanessa continued their conversation about wine consultations and brand elevation. Neither of them looked at the laptop. Neither of them acknowledged the email notifications that painted David's financial reality in stark terms. They simply continued discussing $15,000 consulting fees as if $50,000 gambling debts didn't exist. As if Mia hadn't seen the truth reflected in the laptop's dark screen. The restaurant would have to wait. This conversation was far from over. But David was already closing the laptop. Already standing to clear the breakfast dishes. Already moving to erase the evidence that had briefly illuminated their kitchen like lightning in a summer storm. "Have a good day, honey," he said. His kiss felt cold against her cheek. "Don't work too hard. Don't work too hard. Don't ask too many questions. Don't obsess over pennies. Don't sabotage the building deal. Don't notice the $50,000 elephant dancing in her own kitchen." Mia picked up her keys and headed for the door. But she felt like a ghost in her own home. Invisible except when writing checks. Inaudible except when providing authorization for consulting fees and insurance consultations she never requested. The humid New Orleans air wrapped around her like a shroud as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Jazz music drifted from a nearby cafe. Tourists laughed and pointed at architecture that had survived hurricanes and decades of neglect. But some storms came from inside the house. And those were the hardest to weather. The restaurant on Magazine Street buzzed with lunch crowd energy. Crystal glasses caught afternoon light from tall windows. White tablecloths stretched across mahogany surfaces like fresh snow. The kind of place where business deals were born and died between appetizers and dessert. Mia sat across from Robert Chen, the building broker. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the humidity. His suit cost more than most people's monthly rent. But his eyes held the sharp intelligence that had built his real estate empire from nothing. "The historic property is remarkable," Robert said. He spread photographs across the table like tarot cards. 1847 construction. Original brickwork. Wrought iron balconies that are architectural treasures. King's legacy would rise from those bones. Mia's flagship restaurant, the crown jewel of her empire. She could already see copper pots gleaming in the kitchen. Hear the symphony of sautéing and chopping that meant life and prosperity. But David fidgeted beside her like a man sitting on hot coals. His water glass left rings on the white tablecloth. His leg bounced under the table with nervous energy. Vanessa sat across from them, radiant in a blue silk dress that brought out her eyes. She listened to Robert's presentation with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Her manicured fingers traced the rim of her wine glass. "The numbers are solid," Robert continued. $5 million purchase price. Prime French Quarter location. Tourist foot traffic alone guarantees profitability. $5 million. The number that had haunted Mia's dreams for 6 months. Her entire life savings plus a significant loan. Everything she had built wagered on one final throw of the dice. About the deed, David interrupted suddenly. His voice cracked like a teenager asking for a first date. "We've been discussing ownership structure." Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. In 40 years of real estate transactions, he had heard every possible family arrangement. But his expression suggested this conversation was heading somewhere unusual. "Oh?" Robert set down his wine glass. "What did you have in mind?" David pulled out a folder thick with documents. His hands shook as he opened it. Papers scattered slightly before he regained control. Charts and graphs and official-looking forms with impressive letterheads. "We want to put the property in Vanessa's name," David announced. The words hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Mia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The seafood gumbo suddenly tasted like sawdust. "David," she began. "Hear me out," he continued quickly. "It's all about tax optimization. If Mia buys the property, her tax bracket explodes. Capital gains rates would be devastating." He spread papers across the table with the enthusiasm of a magician revealing his grand trick. Tax projection charts filled with numbers that seemed to dance before Mia's eyes. Calculations that painted financial ruin in stark black ink. "But Vanessa has zero income right now," David explained. "Completely clean tax situation. She can hold the title as a shelter strategy. We maintain operational control, but she's the legal owner." Vanessa nodded sagely as if this plan made perfect sense. "I'm happy to help the family. God knows I need a purpose after my divorce." Purpose. Holding title to a $5 million restaurant would certainly provide purpose. Along with legal ownership of Mia's life's work. Robert studied the documents with professional skepticism. His experienced eyes moved across columns of numbers and projections. "These calculations seem aggressive. I'd recommend consulting with a tax attorney before proceeding." "Already handled," David said smoothly. "I consulted with top financial advisors. This is basic tax shelter strategy. Smart money always finds ways to minimize government theft." Smart money, government theft. David's vocabulary had expanded to include terms he had never used before. Like someone had coached him in financial terminology overnight. Mia looked at the tax charts more carefully. The numbers were impressive. Columns of projected savings that would dwarf the property purchase price over time. But something felt wrong about the calculations. Like recipes that looked perfect on paper but failed in actual kitchens. "I need to see these numbers verified," she said. "Mia," David's voice carried a sharp edge. "This is why you're a chef, not a CEO. You don't understand high finance." The words hit like a physical blow. Around them, lunch conversations continued. Crystal glasses clinked. Servers moved between tables with practiced grace. But Mia felt like every eye in the restaurant was watching her humiliation. Just a chef, not a CEO. Not the woman who had built an empire from nothing. Not the businesswoman who had negotiated supplier contracts and managed cash flow and turned empty storefronts into thriving restaurants. Just a chef. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. He had witnessed family dynamics in countless business deals. But public humiliation usually happened in private conference rooms, not upscale restaurants. Vanessa leaned forward with sympathetic concern. "Mia, darling, David's just trying to protect your investment. Tax law is complicated. Let the experts handle the boring details." Experts. David, who couldn't balance a checkbook, had apparently become a tax optimization expert. Vanessa, whose business experience consisted of spending 3 husbands into divorce court, was offering financial advice. Mia forced a smile. Her face felt like it might crack from the effort. Under the table, her hands clenched into fists. Nails dug into palms until pain cut through the numbness. "Of course," she heard herself say. "I'm just being cautious." "Caution is good," Robert said diplomatically. "But sometimes overthinking prevents progress." He gathered the tax projections into a neat stack. His movements were careful, professional. But Mia caught him glancing at his watch. Successful brokers didn't waste time on indecisive clients. Vanessa's purse fell from her chair, spilling contents across the floor. Lipstick tubes and breath mints scattered like dice. A receipt fluttered under Mia's feet. "Oh, how clumsy," Vanessa laughed. She scrambled to collect her belongings with theatrical embarrassment. Mia bent to help. Her fingers closed around the wayward receipt before Vanessa could retrieve it. The paper felt crisp between her fingers. Recent. Today's date printed in small black numbers. Beaumont Jewelers. $5,247.83. Payment method King Business Amex. $5,000. Charged to her business credit card. For jewelry she had never purchased from a store she had never visited. Mia straightened slowly. The receipt felt like evidence in a murder trial. Proof of crimes committed in broad daylight while she focused on tax projections and title transfers. "Everything all right?" Robert asked. "Perfect," Mia said. She slipped the receipt into her purse. Just helping Vanessa collect her things. Vanessa's smile never wavered, but her eyes held a flicker of calculation. Like a poker player wondering if her bluff had been called. The lunch continued with forced normalcy. Robert outlined closing procedures and timeline requirements. David asked questions about title transfer processes. Vanessa offered opinions about interior design possibilities. But Mia heard everything through a fog of growing realization. The tax projections, the unauthorized jewelry purchase, the gambling debt emails, the insurance consultations she never received. It was all connected. A web of financial manipulation with her business as the spider's dinner. "I'll need a few days to review everything," Mia said finally. Robert nodded. "Of course. $5 million deserves careful consideration. I'll hold the property for 1 week. After that, I have other interested buyers." Other buyers. The gentle pressure that moved indecisive clients toward quick decisions. Robert was good at his job. But he didn't know he was selling to people planning theft instead of purchase. The check arrived on a silver tray. David reached for it automatically. The gesture of a man accustomed to paying for meals with other people's money. "I'll handle it," Mia said. Her voice carried more authority than she felt. Outside, Magazine Street shimmered with afternoon heat. Tourists wilted under umbrellas and sought shade in boutique doorways. The scent of coffee and beignets drifted from nearby cafes. "That went well," David said. He was already planning the next step. "We can move forward with the title transfer tomorrow." Title transfer. Tomorrow. The speed that suggested urgency David had never expressed about his own responsibilities. "I need more time to think," Mia said. "About what?" Vanessa linked her arm through David's like they were the married couple. "The tax benefits are obvious. Even I can see that, and finance bores me to tears." Finance that bored her to tears had cost Mia's business over $15,000 in 1 week. Consulting fees plus jewelry purchases plus whatever other unauthorized expenses were hidden in account statements. "Just time," Mia repeated. They walked toward the car in uncomfortable silence. David's jaw was tight with frustration. Vanessa's heels clicked against pavement like a countdown timer. The black sedan from earlier in the week was parked across the street. Tinted windows revealed nothing, but somehow, its presence felt connected to everything else. Another piece of a puzzle Mia was only beginning to recognize. "Mia." David stopped walking. His voice carried desperate edges. "Don't overthink this. Sometimes the best opportunities require quick decisions. Quick decisions. Like marriage proposals made after 6 months of dating. Like business partnerships formed on handshakes and promises. Like title transfers that moved $5 million properties into the names of women who collected divorce settlements like souvenirs." "I understand," Mia said. But understanding and agreeing were different animals entirely. And Mia was beginning to understand far more than David realized. The jewelry receipt burned in her purse like hidden flames. $5,000 spent on adornments while her business account funded consulting fees and mystery consultations. The shame wasn't from David's public humiliation anymore. The shame was from letting it continue this long. From being the chef instead of the CEO of her own life. That was going to change. 3 o'clock in the morning found Mia driving through empty French Quarter streets. Streetlights cast yellow pools on wet asphalt. The city slept fitfully around her, recovering from another day of excess and celebration. Her restaurant stood dark against the night sky. Mia's table, in elegant script across the front window. 23 years of dreams made real in brick and mortar. But tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. The key turned easily in the lock. The familiar scent of garlic and bay leaves wrapped around her like a worn apron. Home. More home than the penthouse with its unwelcome guests and hidden debts. The kitchen gleamed under fluorescent lights. Stainless steel surfaces reflected her tired face in fractured pieces. Copper pots hung from hooks like sleeping sentries. Everything in its place, waiting for tomorrow's service. But tomorrow felt like it might never come. Mia booted up the office computer. The screen glowed blue in the darkness beyond the kitchen. Numbers and passwords and digital pathways to everything she had built. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory born of countless late-night sessions balancing books and planning menus. The business checking account loaded slowly. Line by line, transaction by transaction, The truth revealed itself in merciless detail. Consulting fee, V. King, $10,000, last Tuesday. Professional services, V. King, $7,500. Friday. Strategic planning, V. King, $5,000. Monday. $22,500 in 1 week. Vanessa's consulting empire had been impressively productive. Rebranding and strategic planning and professional services that existed nowhere except in David's signatures on withdrawal slips. The business line of credit showed a balance that made Mia's stomach clench. Maxed out. $60,000 borrowed against future revenues. Money that was supposed to fund the building purchase had already evaporated into consulting fees and strategic planning sessions. But the credit line applications bore signatures that looked nothing like her handwriting. Someone had forged her authorization. Someone with access to her social security number and business identification. Someone who knew enough about her finances to fool bank representatives. Mia printed the statements page by page. The laser printer hummed in the silent kitchen. Black ink on white paper, creating a paper trail of systematic theft. Evidence that would hold up in court if anyone cared enough to prosecute family members. But prosecution required discovery, and discovery required proof. She searched through David's briefcase, abandoned beside the office desk. Leather portfolio with brass clasps, a graduation gift from his mother decades ago. Inside, folders bulged with documents that had nothing to do with his non-existent consulting business. Insurance forms filled out in Vanessa's careful handwriting. Medical consultation authorizations bearing forged signatures. A stack of credit applications with Mia's information but contact numbers she didn't recognize. At the bottom, wedged between expired business cards and dry cleaning receipts, she found it. Power of attorney form, partially completed. Mia's name in the subject line. David's name in the agent section. And in the middle, a declaration that made her blood freeze. Subject demonstrates signs of early onset dementia and cognitive decline requiring immediate financial guardianship. Dementia, cognitive decline, financial guardianship. They weren't just stealing her money. They were preparing to steal her life. To declare her incompetent and install David as legal guardian of her assets and decisions. To warehouse her in some sterile care facility while they liquidated everything she had built. The form was dated next Friday. The day after the building closing. After the title transfer to Vanessa's name. After the $5 million purchase that would complete their theft. Mia sank into the office chair. The briefcase slipped from numb fingers, spilling papers across the floor like fallen leaves. Around her, the restaurant kitchen hummed with refrigerator motors and ice makers. The sound of commerce continuing even in darkness. But her empire was crumbling while she slept in guest rooms and signed consulting fee authorizations. The tears came without warning. 40 years of work reduced to paper trails and forged signatures. A marriage of 10 years revealed as an elaborate con game. Trust turned to betrayal with the stroke of a pen. She cried for the naive woman who had believed in David's protection. For the businesswoman who had handed over financial control in the name of love. For the chef who had built an empire only to watch it disappear into someone else's bank account. The cold kitchen floor felt solid beneath her body. Real, honest, unlike the people who shared her bed and kitchen table while planning her destruction. But as she lay there, surrounded by evidence of systematic betrayal, something else stirred in her chest. Not despair, not defeat, anger. Pure, clean anger that cut through grief like a knife through butter. The rage of a woman who had built something beautiful and watched parasites try to devour it. The fury of someone whose trust had been weaponized against her own interests. Mia wiped her eyes with her apron. The same apron that had caught tears of joy when the restaurant first turned a profit. When food critics praised her gumbo. When customers returned again and again, bringing friends and family to share in her culinary magic. No, she said aloud. Her voice echoed off stainless steel surfaces. No more. She stood slowly, gathering the scattered papers. Evidence of crimes committed in broad daylight by people who counted on her silence. Who banked on her embarrassment preventing exposure? Who calculated that shame would protect them better than any legal strategy? They had miscalculated badly. The power of attorney form went into her purse first. Then the forged credit applications. the insurance authorizations, the withdrawal slips bearing David's signature but her account numbers. Everything that proved systematic financial abuse. Everything that demonstrated premeditation and conspiracy. Everything that would convince federal agents that this wasn't family drama but organized crime. Her phone buzzed against the office desk. Text message. David's name on the screen. Where are you? Worried sick. Come home. Home. Where Vanessa slept in silk sheets while planning Mia's commitment to a memory care facility. Where David practiced concerned husband while forging her signatures on legal documents. Mia typed back slowly. At restaurant. Inventory issues. Home soon. The lie came easily. Truth was a luxury she could no longer afford with people who had built their lives on deception. But she wasn't going home. Not yet. She had phone calls to make. Evidence to secure. A federal case to build against the people who had tried to steal her life while she slept in guest rooms and worried about consulting fees. The clock on the wall showed 4:30 a.m. In 3 hours, the city would wake up. Businesses would open. Federal agents would begin their workday. Phone lines that had been dark all night would come alive with the possibility of justice. Mia King had been a chef, not a CEO, according to David's public humiliation. Just a cook who didn't understand high finance and tax optimization. But chefs understood fire. They knew how to control it, direct it, use it to transform raw ingredients into something magnificent. And sometimes, fire was exactly what a situation required. The restaurant kitchen waited around her like a war room. Tomorrow's prep work could wait. Tonight was for building cases and gathering evidence and planning the kind of meal that would leave her guests with a lasting memory. Justice, served at exactly the right temperature. 20 years ago, the lease agreement had seemed like a fairy tale ending. Mia traced her finger across the faded signature on yellowed paper. Her handwriting looked young then. Optimistic. Full of dreams about copper pots and perfect roux. David had kissed her hand after she signed. I'll handle the boring numbers, you create the magic. The memory played like a film reel in her tired mind. His smile had been warm that day. Protective. The kind of expression that made a woman believe she had found a true partner. She had been so grateful. The joint bank account agreement lay beneath the lease. Right of survivorship clause highlighted in yellow marker. David's insistence, even then. Smart couples plan for the future, he had said. This protects us both. Protection that looked different now. In 20 years of hindsight, his protection felt more like preparation. Setting up legal frameworks that would serve him better than her. Installing himself as beneficiary of everything she would build. The sunrise crept through the restaurant's tall windows. Golden light painted the empty dining room in soft pastels. Soon, servers would arrive for the morning shift. Coffee would brew. The day's service would begin with chopping vegetables and checking inventory. Normal work for normal people with normal problems. Mia folded the old documents carefully. Paper evidence of the moment she had traded independence for the illusion of partnership. When her name on the lease became their future together. When his signature on banking forms became her path to financial vulnerability. The phone felt heavy in her hand. Margaret Fouché, retired forensic accountant, old friend from better days when friendships weren't clouded by hidden debts and forged signatures. Mia? Margaret's voice carried decades of Louisiana drawl. Child, it's 5 in the morning. You better be calling with good news. I need your help. Silence stretched across the phone line. Margaret had investigated financial crimes for 30 years before retirement. She knew the difference between family squabbles and federal cases. What kind of help? The kind that sends people to prison. Another pause. Longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her voice had shed all traces of casual friendship. Professional investigator mode engaged. Where do you want to meet? The coffee shop on Royal Street buzzed with early morning energy. Construction workers grabbed beignets before job sites opened. Hotel workers sipped café au lait between overnight shifts. The kind of place where serious conversations could hide among ordinary New Orleans breakfast conversations. Margaret arrived precisely at 7. Gray hair pulled back severely. Reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. The same woman who had unraveled embezzlement schemes and exposed money laundering operations for 3 decades. Mia spread the evidence across the small table. Bank statements and forged documents and insurance authorizations. A paper trail of systematic theft laid out between coffee cups and sugar packets. How long has this been going on? Margaret asked. Her trained eyes moved across the documents with surgical precision. Months. Maybe longer. I just started noticing last week. The consulting fees are clumsy. Amateur work. But the insurance fraud shows planning. Someone researched procedures and providers. This isn't impulse crime. Margaret's pen moved across a yellow notepad, recording dates and amounts and patterns that told stories about criminal intent. The power of attorney form is the smoking gun, she continued. Federal crime. Conspiracy to commit elder fraud. Wire fraud if they used electronic banking. Tax evasion if they didn't report the stolen income. Elder fraud. The words stung like alcohol on open wounds. At 62, Mia had become a target demographic. Vulnerable elderly woman with substantial assets and trusting nature. What do I do? Document everything. Secure your assets. Contact federal agents. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. And you need to be prepared for what comes next. What came next was family destruction. Marriage dissolution. Public exposure of private betrayals. The kind of scandal that made newspaper headlines and destroyed reputations. They're planning to have me declared incompetent, Mia said quietly. Over my dead body. Margaret's eyes flashed with protective anger. I've seen you manage complex business operations for decades. Your mind is sharp as ever. Sharp enough to recognize manipulation. Smart enough to gather evidence. Competent enough to build federal cases against people who had underestimated her cognitive abilities. The coffee shop door chimed as Margaret left. Mia remained at the small table, surrounded by evidence of betrayal but also possibility. Justice might be complicated and painful and messy, but it was also available to women who refused to be victims. Her phone buzzed. David again. Coming home for breakfast? Vanessa's making her famous French toast. Famous among whom? Ex-husbands who had paid for the ingredients before discovering credit cards maxed out on luxury purchases. Mia typed back carefully. David, you're right. Let's do the deed transfer your way. I trust your judgment. The lie felt like strategy now instead of survival. Sometimes the best way to catch predators was to let them think their prey remained unaware of danger. Great. Vanessa will be so happy. We'll celebrate tonight. Celebrate. David's enthusiasm for spending her money had never wavered throughout their marriage. Only now she understood why. The drive home took her through the Garden District's tree-lined streets. Mansions stood behind wrought iron gates like financial fortresses. Old money and new money and stolen money all looked the same from the outside. But appearances deceived. Beautiful houses could hide ugly secrets. Loving marriages could mask systematic theft. Protective husbands could be elaborate con artists playing long games with patient precision. The penthouse elevator rose slowly toward floors that no longer felt like home. Toward conversations about French toast with people who planned her legal incompetency between breakfast and lunch. But Mia King was done being anyone's victim. Done sleeping in guest rooms while thieves occupied her master suite. Done signing authorizations for consulting fees that consulted on nothing except efficient asset stripping. The elevator opened onto familiar hallway decorated with her photographs and furnished with her antiques. Everything she had worked for, surrounded by people who saw dollar signs instead of memories. Mia, Vanessa's voice rang with false warmth. Perfect timing. Breakfast is ready. Perfect timing indeed. For the performance of a lifetime. For playing the role of naive elderly woman until federal agents arrived to change the script. For serving justice at exactly the right temperature to people who had never learned the difference between love and larceny. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter. French toast sizzled on the griddle. Coffee perked in the machine. All the aromas of normal family breakfast. Except families didn't usually plan each other's financial destruction between helpings of syrup and fruit. Everything smells wonderful, Mia said. She took her place at the table where they had planned her downfall in comfortable domestic surroundings. But she wasn't the same woman who had left this kitchen 12 hours ago. That woman had been confused and hurt and overwhelmed by evidence she didn't want to believe. This woman understood exactly what she was dealing with. And she had a plan. Playing the submissive wife came easier than Mia expected. Years of marriage had taught her David's triggers and preferences. He liked agreement. He craved validation. He required an audience for his financial expertise. You were right about the tax benefits, she said over Wednesday morning coffee. I called my attorney. He agrees the shelter strategy makes sense. David's relief was visible. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Coffee stopped shaking in his hand. I knew you'd come around. You just needed time to process the complexity. Complexity. David's word for theft had grown sophisticated over the years. Vanessa should be proud, Mia continued. Her consulting work has been invaluable. Maybe we should expand her role in the new restaurant. Vanessa preened like a cat in sunlight. I'd love to help more. Restaurant management is fascinating. All those moving parts and profit margins. Profit margins that would be easier to manipulate with expanded access to business accounts and operational decisions. Mia could practically see the calculations spinning behind Vanessa's bright smile. Let's plan a celebration, Mia suggested. After the deed signing Friday. Something special. A party to mark the beginning of King's legacy. Brilliant idea, David agreed quickly. We should invite investors. Show off the new partnership structure. Partnership structure. The sophisticated language that disguised theft as business strategy continued to evolve. I'll handle the catering, Mia offered. My specialty. The Last Supper theme. Biblical elegance. The Last Supper. Biblical indeed. Though she doubted David and Vanessa caught the deeper meaning. Their biblical knowledge probably didn't extend to stories about betrayal and justice. While they planned guest lists and menu options, Mia's phone buzzed with text messages. Margaret's forensic team had worked through the night. Bank records analyzed. Digital footprints traced. Federal agents briefed on wire fraud and conspiracy charges. The trap was set. The bait was irresistible, and the predators were too hungry to recognize the danger. Thursday afternoon brought FBI agent Sarah Martinez to the restaurant's back office. 30-something Latina with sharp eyes and no-nonsense attitude. She spread recording equipment across Mia's desk like a surgeon arranging instruments. The wire will be invisible, Agent Martinez explained. Voice activated. Everything they say about the conspiracy goes straight to our servers. Conspiracy. The formal legal term for what Mia's family called tax optimization and consulting fees. Are you ready for this? The agent asked. Once they confess on tape, there's no going back. Federal charges. Prison time. Your marriage is over. Marriage. Mia considered the word carefully. When had her marriage become a criminal enterprise? When David first forged her signature? When Vanessa moved into the master bedroom? Or 20 years ago, when she signed joint banking agreements that enabled systematic theft? My marriage ended when I found the power of attorney form, she said quietly. This just makes it official. Agent Martinez nodded. She had seen financial abuse cases before. Wives who discovered their trusting nature had been weaponized against their own interests. Women who built empires only to watch family members plan their liquidation. Remember, the agent said as she finished installing equipment. Let them talk. Ask leading questions. Get them to explain the tax shelter strategy in detail. We need conspiracy confessions, not just theft admissions. Conspiracy confessions. The kind of detailed explanations that David loved providing. His opportunity to demonstrate financial sophistication to an audience that finally appreciated his expertise. He would talk. They both would. Pride and greed made people careless with words. The penthouse hummed with party preparations Friday evening. Catering staff arranged champagne stations and hors d'oeuvres tables. White flowers filled crystal vases. Candles cast warm light across surfaces that would soon witness confessions and arrests. The guest list read like a who's who of New Orleans society. Restaurant investors and real estate developers and federal agents disguised as business contacts. An audience for the performance that would end David and Vanessa's criminal careers. Everything looks perfect, Vanessa said. She wore a red silk dress that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Diamond earrings caught candlelight like captured fire. You really outdid yourself. Outdid herself indeed. Federal cases required attention to detail that rivaled perfect roux and properly seasoned gumbo. David emerged from the bedroom adjusting his tie. Black suit and gold cufflinks and the smile of a man about to achieve his greatest financial coup. He kissed Mia's cheek with theatrical affection. Ready to make history? History. David's version involved stolen fortunes and legal incompetency declarations. Mia's version involved handcuffs and federal prison sentences. Ready, she confirmed. The elevator doors opened to reveal the first guests. Wine flowed. Conversation buzzed with anticipation and curiosity. Everyone knew they were witnessing something significant. Few understood exactly what. Robert Chen arrived precisely at 8. The building broker carried document folders and architectural plans, and purchase agreements that would transfer $5 million worth of property into Vanessa's name. Legal theft disguised as tax optimization strategy. Shall we begin the formalities? Robert asked. They gathered around the dining room table. Documents spread across mahogany surfaces like evidence in a courtroom. Deed transfers and tax projections and power of attorney forms that would complete David's financial takeover. Mia touched the recording device hidden beneath her silk blouse. Federal agents positioned throughout the crowd adjusted their own equipment. Justice waited in wireless signals and digital storage devices. Before we sign anything, Mia said clearly, I want everyone to understand exactly what we're doing here. David beamed with professorial pride. His moment to demonstrate expertise had arrived. An audience of sophisticated investors waited for his financial wisdom. Of course, he said expansively. Tax shelter strategy is complex. Most people don't understand the legal nuances. Legal nuances. Federal crimes disguised as sophisticated financial planning. Explain it to me one more time, Mia requested. The deed goes into Vanessa's name because you're in the highest tax bracket, David explained patiently. Property ownership at your income level triggers capital gains disasters. But Vanessa has zero reported income. Clean tax situation. She holds the title, we control the operation, everyone saves money. And my power of attorney? David's confidence faltered slightly. The power of attorney form sat at the bottom of the document stack, hidden like a snake in tall grass. Just precautionary, he said carefully. Estate planning. In case something happens to you, I can manage your affairs without legal complications. Something happening to her, like sudden onset dementia that would require immediate financial guardianship, like cognitive decline that would justify institutional care while her assets were liquidated. What kind of something? Mia pressed gently. Vanessa stepped into the conversation with practiced smoothness. Medical emergencies, accidents. You know how fragile life can be at our age. Fragile life. At 62, Mia had apparently entered the fragile demographic. Vulnerable to medical emergencies that would require immediate legal intervention by concerned family members. The power of attorney form mentions dementia, Mia observed quietly. The room went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the catering staff seemed to hold their breath. David's face went white as uncooked flour. Just standard legal language. Covers all possibilities. It says I demonstrate signs of early onset dementia requiring immediate financial guardianship. The words hung in the air like accusations. Around them, party guests shifted uncomfortably. They had come for celebration, not confession. But federal recording equipment captured every syllable. That's just precautionary language, Vanessa said quickly. Legal forms always include worst-case scenarios. Worst-case scenarios that David and Vanessa had planned to implement immediately after the property transfer. Dementia declarations that would have warehoused Mia in memory care facilities while they liquidated her empire. I see, Mia said softly. And the consulting fees Vanessa has been receiving? Professional services, David answered automatically. Marketing consultation, brand development, strategic planning. For what specific projects? Another silence. Longer this time. David and Vanessa exchanged glances like co-conspirators caught in lies they had practiced but never perfected. Wine program enhancement, Vanessa said finally. Social media strategy. Demographic analysis. Could you show me the analysis? It's in development. In development. $22,000 in consulting fees had produced analysis that remained permanently in development. Strategic planning that existed nowhere except in withdrawal authorizations. What about the insurance consultations I never authorized? David's hands shook as he reached for his wine glass. Clerical errors. We discussed this. Dr. Beaumont's Aesthetic Center. $800 for cosmetic consultation. But I've never been to Dr. Beaumont's office. The trap was closing with each question. Federal agents throughout the crowd recorded every word. Evidence mounted like layers in perfectly constructed gumbo. Identity theft, David said desperately. Someone must have stolen your insurance information. Someone who knew my social security number and billing address. Someone with access to my personal information. The accusations didn't need to be spoken directly. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Everyone in the room understood exactly who had access to Mia's personal information. Vanessa's composure cracked first. Look, the money situation is complicated. Divorce settlements don't always cover living expenses. Family helps family. Family helping family by forging insurance authorizations and planning incompetency declarations. By stealing business funds and preparing power of attorney documents for women who demonstrated no signs of cognitive decline. The elevator doors opened across the room. 3 people stepped out. Dark suits and serious expressions and the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Agent Martinez approached the table where documents lay scattered like evidence at a crime scene. Her badge gleamed under candlelight. FBI, she announced clearly. David King, Vanessa King, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit elder fraud, and identity theft. The party guests gasped collectively. Wine glasses shattered against marble floors. Catering staff backed toward exits. The kind of chaos that erupted when carefully planned deceptions collapsed in spectacular fashion. David's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and terror in rapid succession. Mia, tell them. This is a misunderstanding, but Mia was pulling documents from her purse. The power of attorney form. The forged insurance authorizations. The bank statements showing systematic theft disguised as consulting fees. Here's the evidence, she said calmly. Everything they planned. Everything they stole. Everything they said. Handcuffs clicked around David's wrists. The sound echoed through the penthouse like closing chapters in a book about betrayal and justice. Vanessa's protests faded into legal warnings about rights and attorneys and federal charges. The party was over, but somehow, justice tasted sweeter than any meal Mia had ever prepared. Federal charges moved through the legal system like perfectly timed clockwork. David and Vanessa's arraignment made front-page news in the Times-Picayune. Restaurant heiress exposes family fraud ring. Local television stations ran footage of handcuffs and perp walks and legal experts explaining wire fraud penalties. Mia watched the coverage from her attorney's office. Samuel Broussard had handled business law for 30 years. Gray-haired Cajun with sharp eyes and sharper questions about asset recovery and victim restitution. They want to plead out, he announced Monday morning. Federal time versus state prison. Their attorneys are recommending cooperation. Cooperation, the legal term for criminals providing information about co-conspirators in exchange for reduced sentences. But David and Vanessa's conspiracy had been remarkably small-scale. Just 2 people stealing from one victim they assumed would never fight back. What kind of deal? 5 years federal time, full asset forfeiture, complete restitution of stolen funds plus penalties, and permanent restraining orders prohibiting contact. Permanent restraining orders, legal protection from family members who had demonstrated their willingness to destroy her life for financial gain. The kind of protection that should have been unnecessary but had become essential. I accept, Mia said. The plea hearing filled a downtown courtroom with reporters and curious spectators. David and Vanessa sat beside their attorneys like children called to the principal's office. Prison jumpsuits had replaced designer clothing. Handcuffs and leg shackles had replaced jewelry and silk scarves. Judge Eleanor Trosclair reviewed the charges with judicial precision. Wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, conspiracy. Each count carried maximum sentences that would have kept them imprisoned well into their 70s. This court has reviewed the victim impact statement, Judge Trosclair said. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had sentenced criminals for 3 decades. Mrs. King, would you like to address the defendants before sentencing? Mia stood slowly. The courtroom fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and the scratch of reporters' pens. David and Vanessa refused to meet her eyes. Your Honor, Mia began, these people didn't just steal my money. They tried to steal my life. They planned to have me declared incompetent and warehoused in a memory care facility while they liquidated everything I had built. Her voice carried across the courtroom without amplification. 40 years of commanding restaurant kitchens had taught her to project authority and clarity. But their real crime wasn't theft. It was betrayal. They weaponized my trust against my own interests. They turned love into larceny and marriage into a criminal enterprise. David's shoulders shook with what might have been remorse. Or fear of federal prison. With him, distinguishing between genuine emotion and calculated performance had always been impossible. I forgive them, Mia continued. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger would poison my future. They gave up their family for money they never earned. I call that a fair trade. Judge Trosclair nodded approvingly. Victim statements that focused on healing rather than revenge always carried more weight in sentencing decisions. David King, Vanessa King, please rise for sentencing. They stood unsteadily. Prison food and stress had aged them both dramatically. David's hair had gone completely gray. Vanessa's face showed lines that expensive cosmetics could no longer hide. The court sentences David King to 5 years federal imprisonment. Vanessa King to 5 years federal imprisonment. Full restitution to the victim totaling $287,000 including penalties and interest. Asset forfeiture of all property purchased with stolen funds. Permanent restraining orders prohibiting contact with the victim. The gavel fell with finality. Justice delivered in measured doses according to legal prescription. David and Vanessa were led away in handcuffs toward federal transportation vehicles. Mia watched their departure without satisfaction or revenge. Just the quiet relief of someone who had fought back against predators and won. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters dispersed to file stories about elder fraud and family betrayal. Legal officials moved on to the next case on crowded dockets. The machinery of justice ground forward with impersonal efficiency. But for Mia, the real work was just beginning. Asset recovery took 3 months. Bank accounts were unfrozen. Forged transactions were reversed. Business lines of credit were restored to legitimate balances. The financial infrastructure of her empire slowly rebuilt itself from federal seizure and criminal restitution. The building on Magazine Street waited like a patient lover. Robert Chen had held the property through the legal proceedings. The seller understood that federal cases occasionally complicated real estate transactions. Justice moved slowly, but it usually moved in the right direction. Are you ready to proceed? Robert asked during their second closing meeting. All the legal complications have been resolved. Ready? Mia considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she had been ready to trust family members with her life's work. Ready to believe that love and financial manipulation could coexist peacefully. Ready to sign away her independence for the illusion of protection. Now she was ready for different things. Ready to trust her own instincts. Ready to build an empire that belonged entirely to her. Ready to sign documents in her own name without co-signers or partners or well-meaning advisors. I'm ready, she said. The deed transfer took 10 minutes. Her signature appeared twice on official documents. Purchase price $5 million. Owner Mia King. No tax shelters or title holders or strategic partnerships. Just honest businesswoman buying property with money she had earned through decades of hard work. King's legacy would rise from honest bones. The renovation took 6 months. Original brickwork was restored. Wrought iron balconies were reinforced and repainted. Modern kitchen equipment was installed behind historic facades. The kind of project that required vision and patience and substantial financial resources. All of which belonged entirely to her. The grand opening drew crowds that stretched around 2 city blocks. Food critics and local celebrities and loyal customers who had followed her career for decades. The kind of audience that appreciated honest cooking and authentic flavors uncompromised by focus groups or marketing consultants. Welcome to King's Legacy, Mia announced to the gathered crowd. She stood on the restaurant's front steps like a general addressing victorious troops. This restaurant represents everything I've learned about cooking, business, and life. Honest ingredients, authentic flavors, and the understanding that some things are worth fighting for. The applause lasted 3 full minutes. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled quotes. Local television stations broadcast footage of a woman who had fought back against betrayal and emerged stronger. But the real victory wasn't in newspaper headlines or television coverage. It was in the quiet satisfaction of building something that belonged entirely to her. of making decisions without consulting co-signers or strategic partners, of sleeping peacefully in her own bedroom without checking locks or counting silverware. The penthouse had been sold 6 months earlier. Too many memories of betrayal and handcuffs and federal agents. The money had funded King's legacy and a smaller, more secure apartment in the Garden District. Close enough to the restaurant for daily management. Far enough from the French Quarter to escape unwelcome associations. Her new life was smaller in some ways. Fewer bedrooms and less marble countertop space. But it was entirely hers. Every signature on every document belonged to her alone. Every decision flowed from her judgment instead of committee consensus with people who had hidden agendas. The restaurant thrived like a plant finally given proper soil and sunlight. Reservations were booked weeks in advance. Food critics wrote reviews that compared her gumbo to religious experiences. Business expanded naturally without strategic planning consultants or demographic analysis. 6 months after opening, King's Legacy won James Beard recognition for Outstanding Southern Restaurant. The award ceremony in Chicago drew industry professionals from across the country. Mia accepted the bronze medallion wearing a simple black dress and her grandmother's pearls. "This award belongs to everyone who believes that authentic food comes from authentic people," she said during her acceptance speech. "And to everyone who understands that some fights are worth having, even when family members are on the other side." The audience rose in standing ovation. Recognition for a woman who had built an empire, lost it to theft, fought to recover it, and emerged stronger. The kind of story that inspired people facing their own betrayals and financial predators. But the real satisfaction came later. In the quiet moments after service ended and the last customer left satisfied and the kitchen was cleaned for tomorrow's prep work. When she sat alone in her office reviewing genuine profit margins and authentic success metrics. No consulting fees, no strategic planning expenses, no mysterious withdrawals or forged authorizations. Just honest business conducted by honest people who earned their paychecks through legitimate work. At 63, Mia King had learned to distinguish between love and larceny. Between protection and predation. Between family loyalty and criminal conspiracy. The lessons had been expensive. But the education was worth every penny. 2 years later, morning sunlight streamed through the Garden District apartment windows. Mia stood at her new kitchen counter, hands steady as they measured coffee grounds. The arthritis remained, but it no longer felt like an enemy. Just another ingredient to work with in the recipe of daily life. The newspaper lay folded beside her breakfast plate. King's Legacy had earned its second James Beard nomination. The headline read, "New Orleans Chef Builds Empire on Authentic Foundations." No mention of federal fraud cases or family betrayal. Just recognition for honest cooking and genuine success. Business was better than ever. The restaurant booked solid for months ahead. Food and Wine magazine had featured her story about rebuilding after financial abuse. The article brought customers who appreciated not just her gumbo, but her courage to fight back against people who had tried to destroy her life. She taught cooking classes now, too. Financial ingredients for senior women. How to protect assets. How to recognize predatory behavior. How to build support systems that couldn't be weaponized against your own interests. The classes filled immediately. Apparently, Mia wasn't the only woman who had discovered that trust could be exploited by people who spoke the language of love but practiced the art of larceny. Never let anyone else stir your pot had become her signature lesson. Financial pots, business pots, life pots. Keep your hands on your own spoon. The phone rang as she finished breakfast. Margaret Fouché, calling with updates on another financial abuse case they were helping prosecute. 3 women in Metairie whose sons had been forging Social Security checks and preparing power of attorney documents. Same pattern, Margaret reported. Gambling debts, fake consulting fees, plans for incompetency declarations. But these women fought back before losing everything. Fighting back, the phrase that had become Mia's accidental specialty. Teaching women that age didn't automatically equal vulnerability. That senior citizens could build federal cases and testify in court and send family members to prison when necessary. How can I help? Victim Impact Statement. Your story carries weight with juries. Proves that financial abuse isn't just numbers on paper. It's systematic destruction of trust and independence. Testimony had become part of Mia's routine. Federal courthouses throughout Louisiana had heard her describe the betrayal process. How predators identified vulnerable targets. How they normalized small thefts before escalating to major financial crimes. How they used love and family loyalty as weapons against their victims' self-interest. Each case was different, but the patterns remained consistent. Gradual erosion of financial independence. Gaslighting about memory and competence. Legal documents prepared without consent or understanding. The systematic replacement of authentic relationships with criminal enterprises disguised as family care. "I'll be there," Mia confirmed. The drive to King's Legacy took her through streets that had witnessed her journey from victim to survivor to advocate. Past the penthouse where she had been betrayed. Past the courtroom where justice had been delivered. Past the federal building where she had first learned that families could be criminal enterprises. But mostly past places where she had learned to trust her own instincts again. The restaurant hummed with lunch prep energy. Servers polished silverware. Kitchen staff prepped vegetables. The same honest work that had built her first empire and would sustain her second one. Different this time, though. Every employee was personally vetted. Every financial advisor was independently verified. Every document was read completely before signing. Trust required verification now, not blind faith in family relationships. Morning, Ms. King called Marcus, her head chef. 26 years old, culinary school trained, no family connections to complicate business relationships. He worked for wages, not access to bank accounts or inheritance opportunities. Morning, Marcus. Ready for today's service? Always ready. Ready. The word that had taken on new meaning since federal agents arrested her husband and sister-in-law. Ready for honest business relationships. Ready for transparent financial arrangements. Ready for independence that didn't require co-signers or strategic partnerships. The mail brought the quarterly profit statement. King's Legacy was thriving beyond her most optimistic projections. Revenue had doubled in 18 months. Critical acclaim continued building. Expansion opportunities presented themselves weekly. But growth would happen on her terms now. No consulting fees for demographic analysis she didn't need. No strategic planning sessions that existed mainly to justify unauthorized withdrawals. No partnerships with people whose loyalty could be purchased with financial opportunity. The Department of Justice letter arrived in the afternoon mail. David and Vanessa had been released to halfway house supervision. Good behavior and federal overcrowding had reduced their sentences by 18 months. They would be free completely within 6 months. Free. The word that had different meanings for different people. David and Vanessa would be free to rebuild their lives somewhere far from Louisiana. The restraining orders ensured they couldn't contact her or approach her businesses. But they would be free to start over with whatever lessons federal prison had taught them. Mia was free too. Free from the weight of supporting people who saw her success as their entitlement. Free from relationships that required constant financial authorization. Free from the exhaustion of loving people who practiced elaborate deceptions while planning her legal incompetency. The afternoon cooking class filled the restaurant's private dining room. 12 women between 55 and 75. Retired teachers and nurses and social workers. Women who had spent lifetimes caring for others and now needed to learn how to protect themselves from predatory family members. Financial abuse often begins with small erosions, Mia explained to the group. Unauthorized purchases on credit cards. Questions about retirement benefits from people who never showed interest before. Family members who suddenly need access to your accounts for emergencies that never quite get explained. The women nodded with recognition that spoke of personal experience. Too many understood exactly what she was describing. Too many had discovered that their own children or siblings or spouses had been planning systematic theft disguised as family assistance. The key is trusting your instincts, she continued. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Age doesn't make you paranoid. Experience makes you wise. After the class, she sat alone in the restaurant office reviewing next week's schedule. Vendor meetings, staff evaluations, menu planning sessions, the honest work of building an empire that belonged entirely to her. But also congressional testimony about elder fraud prevention, television interviews about financial abuse patterns, Victim impact statements for federal prosecutors building cases against family members who had weaponized trust against elderly relatives. Her story had become larger than personal recovery. It had become advocacy for women who needed permission to fight back against people who spoke the language of love while practicing systematic theft. The evening service passed in the familiar rhythm of successful restaurants. Orders flew from servers to kitchen. Plates emerged perfectly composed and properly seasoned. Customers left satisfied and planning return visits. The kind of success that money couldn't buy but honest work could earn. At closing time, Mia walked through the empty dining room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Federal testimony about financial crimes. Vendor negotiations for seasonal ingredients. Marketing decisions about expansion possibilities. But tonight was for quiet reflection in spaces she had built with her own hands and protected with her own courage. She sat on her apartment balcony, eating leftover gumbo while jazz music drifted from nearby clubs. The same flavors that had defined her career for 40 years. Honest ingredients combined with authentic techniques to create something nourishing and satisfying. The difference now was context. This gumbo came from her own kitchen, funded by her own money. Enjoyed in her own space without worry about unauthorized bank withdrawals or forged insurance claims. Independence tasted better than any recipe she had ever perfected. The night air was thick with humidity and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities and challenges. But they would be her opportunities and her challenges. No consulting fees required. No strategic partnerships needed. No family members positioning themselves for financial advantage while planning her legal incompetency. Just honest work by honest people who understood the difference between love and larceny. At 64, Mia King had learned that some losses were actually gains in disguise. Losing a marriage had gained her independence. Losing family relationships had gained her peace. Losing trust in others had gained her trust in herself. The arithmetic of betrayal was complex, but the final calculations were surprisingly positive. Life didn't end when it broke apart, she had discovered. Sometimes breaking apart was exactly what was needed to rebuild something stronger and more authentic. What fell to pieces could become the foundation for something better. What looked like ending could be the beginning of a story that was entirely her own. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for spending